I'm Dave Rich, NPPD Sustainable Energy Manager. Been on the committee and was selected to host this session. Got two really great speakers coming up. But if you heard Heidi, you're always supposed to start out with a joke or something that people remember. And so I had planned with Molly to set up a demonstration. And so what I have here is about a 4-inch hailstone. And how many are you familiar with a potato gun? So I was going to have a 4-inch potato gun, load this in. Molly was going to hold a crystal panel in the back, solar panel, and we were going to see if it was going to withstand. The problem is when we ran it up the food chain with Anita, she works for a law firm, and she said, there's no way you guys are going to do that. So that's my opening. This is what we're going to be talking about. Huge hailstones going 100 miles an hour. With that, Lee, you're up first, and we worked with GenPro for many years. Your bio's in the website if you want to look that up, but Lee's been basically in charge of the financial operations at GenPro. So Lee, you're on.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate that. Lee DeLange, I'm the Chief Administrative Officer for GenPro Energy Solutions. Have been there about 8 years and kind of oversee the kind of legal risk contracting HR and wanted to go through the events that kind of happened in June of 2023 in relation to the hail event, the storm event at the Scottsbluff solar site. Now, to start things off, my title has the word administrative in it. My counterpart, Nicole, her talk has to do with hail cannons, so I already know my place in this discussion. I'll make my story brief and we'll move on to the more interesting topic of the day. But I wanted to talk a little bit about what happened that day and the day following and the months that kind of led up to the restoration of that site. The Scottsbluff site is a site that's kind of in our backyard, relatively speaking. We do solar sites all over the country, but Scottsbluff is a few hours from our headquarters. It's a 5.2 megawatt DC site, about 14,000 or so panels that were damaged, 3.5 to 4.5 inch hailstones, along with 100 plus mile an hour winds. That we kind of assumed did some pretty extensive damage. Within a day or so of the storm, we sent people to the site to assess the damage, and in fact, we did see modules broken. What we didn't find was more extensive damage than we kind of we would figure we would find with the extensive winds that were accompanying the storm. There was a tornado about 3.5, 4 miles to the south that hit the ground. There was a lot of winds in and around the area. One of the stories that really are not talked about here is the damage that didn't occur on the site, and I think that's a topic of a conversation that we should be having. Once the assessment was made, we did kind of devise a plan which basically encompassed replacing all of the modules on the site. What was interesting about the 3,500 of the panels did not shatter altogether. Of course, there were microfractures that we assumed were there, so it was decided by the owner that all the panels would be replaced. So that was the plan, replacing just under 14,000 panels. And from there on, like any insurance claim, it took several months to get the process going. GenPro Energy Solutions at the time, we were the O&M provider. We built the system. We were the O&M contract holder as well. So we were pretty much ready to go. We knew that system inside and out, and by the time we got boots on the ground, the first thing our plan included was approaching the site that had a lot of safety measures involved in it. As you can imagine, a site that got damaged by hail, there's a lot of sharp edges, bent edges on things, a lot of hazards that you would encounter. So the first order of business was make sure the workers were properly protected, full PPE on everything, obviously, and the handling of all the material and equipment was very important. The other thing, second to that, was making sure that all the other equipment and material on the site was protected as well from those same sharp edges. For example, all the wire and the cables that were already on site as part of the system that did not get damaged, we protected that as well. So all the cabling, the cab systems, all the wires that were already on site that were not damaged, those were shielded, wrapped, labeled, and protected in place as the modules were removed, palletized, wrapped, and loaded on flatbeds to be removed off site and to be recycled. We partnered with Solar Cycle to get the panels 100% recycled, and that was pretty good effort just to make sure that as the modules were removed from the racking, everything that was potentially could be lost during the removal process was contained. So there was a lot of cardboard, plastic, everything that could have been lost during that process was caught, contained, wrapped, loaded, and taken off the site. So that was the challenging part, getting things off safely, packaged, wrapped, and off the site. So a lot of planning and coordination and effort went into that part of it, and that went really well. The replacement was really kind of a walk in the park. By the time we had boots on the ground to install the panels, again, about 5 megawatts of panels went on, and wire management took place. We were ready to energize. I think it was about 6 to 7 weeks from start to finish. So with 17 workers, 12 of which came from the community of Scottsbluff, which is really great, and of which I think there was about 3 or 4 people that we wanted to hire full-time out of Scottsbluff, and I think we still have a couple of those individuals that we have working for GenPro. So great community effort there, and some great long-term relationships. So all in all, a really good exercise. So like any insurance claim exercise, the process of going through it takes a long time, but the actual work to get something done, a month and a half to actually get from the point of getting boots on the ground to getting it done and to the point of getting energized again, not a big deal. If you follow social media, saw the stories, and that got really blown out of proportion, a lot of misinformation floating around there. It's like, oh, see, I told you so. Solar systems in the Midwest don't mix. It was like a huge, big nothing burger in our opinion. It was not that big a deal to get it up and running again. So for us, it was a pretty easy fix. So that's kind of the process of restoration, getting it repowered again. And I think I kind of touched on the high points, and we can sure ask questions later. Dave?
So we have time for a couple questions before we start with Nicole. Any questions for Lee based on what you've heard? Kurt's got a mic. If you have a question, raise your hand. I see one hand up.
I understand. Unfortunately, I understand that GenPro had a second site this summer with severe hail damage. Could you give us any status on that one, the Cozad site?
That did get hailed out, not as severely. We're in the process of the claim assessment as well with the owner on that one as well. So the percentage of modules that were damaged wasn't as great as Scottsbluff, but the same sort of assessment, like what do we do with the ones that we believe might have gotten, microfractures to the point that they might not produce. But I think that's kind of where we're at with damage like that, where you don't know, an owner probably has to go through that. It's likely more viable just to replace them all. And it's probably more cost effective as well rather than kind of pick through. And from an EPC standpoint, it's a lot more efficient and cost effective just to go through them all and replace them. So again, sort of a question on a project basis, but yeah, that's probably we're pretty close to getting word from the owner what they would like to have done with that site. But yeah.
Other question.
Since solar panels naturally decline in efficiency over time, what is the impact on ROI of replacing them with brand new panels after hail damage?
Ooh, that's a good question. The brains in the room is in the back that I would like to defer that to, but I will be honest with you. I wouldn't be able to answer that question. My economist / guru is not up here right now.
Another question or two?
What's the insurance claims process look like?
Well, we are, from the EPC's perspective, we work with the owner, and we work very close together. Basically, we tell them, here's what it's going to take to replace or repower the system. Their insurance company then I'm just going to speak in plain language. They just kind of drill us down a little bit, like they don't believe it's going to take that. Can we talk about that line item a little bit more? We believe it's going to take that, and we just kind of go back and forth, and it's a negotiation. And so we put up what we believe is realistic numbers, and we just kind of sit at a virtual table and talk through it. And at the end, we do what's best for the owner at the end of the day. So in the Scottsbluff project, we had really great people all the way around, from the owners to the insurance adjusters to to everybody that was putting in effort to get this thing back up and running. Yeah, so it's been pretty good.
Okay, let's go ahead and let Nicole Sedlacek, she's the Economic Development Manager with NPPD, and I asked her to speak about hail cannons and the technology that might prevent these future hail occurrences on solar farms. So with that, and then go ahead and save up your questions. I think we'll have some more time for both of them after that.
I'm not sure what's going on here. Oh. All right. Good afternoon. Like Dave said, Nicole Sedlacek, Economic Development Manager for Nebraska Public Power District. Today, I'm here in my role as resident of the Irish capital of Nebraska, O'Neill, where we do have 2 hail cannons right now. I have no association with the hydroponic greenhouse that's in the community, and I am not a salesperson for the manufacturer of hail cannons. So I'm going to just share with you just some of my community's knowledge of the hail cannon, some history about hail cannons, how long they've been around, and how they work, and just share some information over the years that we've seen in O'Neill. A disclaimer, we have had to replace 2 roofs in O'Neill in the last couple of years, but what we thought might have been hail damage, just because the community did have some minor hail pellets. It was actually the insurance adjuster claimed it as it was wind damage from the types of winds that those 2 storms had on our roof. So just a little disclaimer. Any wine lovers out there? All right, yes, good, okay. We've got a couple of you. Well, we can thank fellow wine lovers for the invention of the hail cannon. It was actually invented by Austrian wine grower Albert Stigger in 1896. So this is going to be just a quick history lesson for the day. And his apparent success at repelling hail at his vineyards led to really this rapid growth of these devices, with more than 10,000 in use by 1900. In 1899, Italy hosted its first hail suppression conference. Wouldn't that have been fun? And the marketing committee would have had a heyday with that, I think. But it was followed up by more of these annual conferences, hail congresses, they call them. And these different events eventually featured 60 different models. So enthusiasm and skepticism spread. But even as skepticism spread about these events, cannons continued to pop up in Austria and France and Spain and Hungary. And by the fourth time that the International Hail Suppression Congress came around in 1902, officials had decided that the cannon's effectiveness was neither proven or disproven. So then that kicked off in 1903 when the Italian government had arranged for a 2-year experiment involving 222 cannons. But results were still inconsistent, and the Italian government actually carried out extensive testing. And by 1909, hail cannons were largely discredited then. They remain popular with enthusiasts. If you go to the World Ag event in Tulare, there's been hail cannon manufacturers exhibiting there. But that's just a little bit of the history of it and just some of the skepticism and optimism over the last 100 or so years on these hail cannons. So how does a hail cannon work? So a hail cannon is a shock wave generator that claims to disrupt the formation of hailstones in the atmosphere. And these devices fire off every 1 to 10 seconds while a storm is approaching, and it goes off until the storm has passed through the area. O'Neill's goes off about every 4 to 5 seconds. You hear a boom, 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 constantly the entire time as a storm is approaching until it's over. So a mixture of acetylene and oxygen is ignited into that lower chamber, which results in that blast. And it travels through the neck into the cone of the cannon, and those shock waves travel upwards into the cloud formations. And the shock wave is what actually disrupts the water droplets that would otherwise freeze into hailstones, causing them to fall as rain or much smaller pellets. I mentioned kind of that boom, boom sound. It is loud. It will wake you up. New residents in the community, their first time we have a storm coming through, they think something is happening, that there's a firing squad somewhere. And so it is loud. It is disruptive. 140 decibels is what it is right up there. And so the manager that operates it, wants you to wear ear protection when you're nearby it, highly recommends it. But even if you're away from the site, you can definitely hear it. It's about 20 to 25 foot in height. And depending on the model, it gives a protection of half a mile to a mile radius of the cannon itself. So in O'Neill, we had our first cannon installed in 2003 to protect the initial 10 acres of glass that we have at our hydroponic greenhouse. 2 expansions at the plant resulted in a second cannon being installed, and you'll see where that arrow is. They're both placed in proximity to each other. But that's where they're installed or where they're at. And so they're protecting those 26 acres of glass. The current owner actually ceased operations of the plant in 2022. The plant has had a really bad series of unfortunate bad luck for the industry, for the facility. And so they are no longer growing in the facility. It's a facility that's currently for sale. But what's interesting, and when we learned that employees, there weren't any more employees at the site, they weren't doing any more growing, the residents, we were, well, they keep the hail cannons going. That's what we were worried about because it's protected our community. And yes, so there is an employee that is still on site at the facility, and one of his duties is he runs out to the facility if he's not there, and he works to make sure the hail cannon is going off when a storm is approaching. So it does provide about a mile radius around the community. So the residents of O'Neill are sold on the hail cannon technology. Oh, sorry, I forgot I had a slide on that. But yeah, a mile radius around the community. So we've had several storms in the 20 plus years that we've had a hail cannon. But this most recent one, August 26th, this might be the one that actually got me the spot on this panel today, because we had a pretty big storm that came up in the O'Neill area. It kind of came out of nowhere one Monday evening, and produced softball-sized hail in the area. And I think I had seen Dave the next morning, and he's like, "Did you guys get hail?" And I was like, "No, we have our hail cannon. We just had little pellets in the town." But as soon as you got outside of the radius of the hail cannon protection, that was where you're seeing the softball-sized hail. So this is just a news article that was online about a week later that NBC News interviewed a resident of Inman, which is 8 miles down the highway from O'Neill, and was interviewing her and talking to her about the softball-sized hail. Our local radio station, KBRX, of course, they've got pictures of everybody showing their size of hail that they collected out of their yards. But I made sure to get the screen capture of the comments. "Did somebody forget to turn the hail cannon on?" was one comment. And then someone said, "Cannon was on." So O'Neill residents are definitely invested about this hail cannon. There have been storms that have come through in the middle of the night, and if the wind is just right, you can't hear it if it's carrying the sound away. And so I'll hear maybe these little pellets of what sounds like hail, and I just kind of panic, and I'll be like, "Get that hail cannon on, get that hail cannon on." But the managers at the facility, they do a great job. In fact, this storm, they use radar to help, alert them when something is developing to make sure they can get out there in time and get it fired up. But he was downtown in one of our local gyms and hightailed it out of there to make it to the plant to get it fired up. So I don't have a lot of facts and data to share about this hail cannon. I just have my own experience as a resident. I reached out to an independent insurance rep, one of my friends, Natalie, and wanted to get her perspective. And I loved what she shared. She said, every community needs one. She's been in insurance in 20 years, and homes within close proximity of the cannon, she says, just don't get the hail damage. It's wild, she says. We see wind claims in O'Neill, but not hail. And the storms that pass through our area, we see hail claims in the Bassett and Stewart and Atkinson area, but it skips O'Neill. And then the hail continues, going on to the Inman and Page area. So it's a blessing for our community and maybe a curse for others. But one summer, we were really hit with hailstorms, and I can't quite remember the year, but I remember the Atkinson West Holt School District. They had to replace their roof twice that summer because of hail damage. And then 18 miles to the east, where we're at in O'Neill, we didn't have the hail claims like Atkinson did with those storms. But these hail cannons definitely come with challenges and controversies. So Volkswagen used cannons in Mexico to prevent, hailstorms. But the farmers, they were saying that it causes drought for them. And so Volkswagen did have to cease operations of their hail cannons. But we've seen these hail cannons used, with car manufacturers. We've seen them, of course, I mentioned the vineyards, but again, our hydroponic greenhouse, the 26 acres under glass, it was a greenhouse that was growing tomatoes, hydroponic tomatoes, and at one time cucumbers. But again, they're not growing anything right now, but they're still invested in protecting all of that glass on their facility. We have had, I was maybe a little bit naive. I'm pretty optimistic about these hail cannons and protecting our community. But I was a little bit naive when I traveled over to Knox County one day and local leaders there, it was a day after a summer thunderstorm, and we had received rain in O'Neill, but Knox County did not get a drop. And they were blaming that hail cannon for that drought that from that storm. There are a couple of manufacturers of these. They're not, I was not able to find a US manufacturer. In fact, the hail cannons that are at the O'Neill facility, they're from New Zealand. They do sell, I think for the amount of protection they do provide, there is an ROI on them. So this one in New Zealand sells for about $50,000. There's a British company also. If you go to hailcannon.com, you can't order it and have it 2-day free shipping by any means, but you can work with that manufacturer to learn more. And again, I mentioned O'Neill's as kind of a combination of, they use radar, but there are systems that use, that take the human element out of it. If someone sleeps through it or, isn't out there in time, that there are cannons that are simply radar controlled systems available to activate the cannons and stop the units. So that is all of my enthusiasm over hail cannons.
Already have one question. Go ahead. And if you would, state your name so everybody knows who you are.
Yeah, Matt Taylor. Question I have on this is, do you know if like a permit, I guess I'll say, is required to install one of those things?
I do not know that. That is a great question. Great question. I don't know.
Okay.
Next question.
Hello, my name is Rick Stanger. Has there been any experimentation with the hertz? I know you said from 1 to 10 hertz, but I just wondered if there'd be a higher frequency that could be done that isn't audible.
Yeah, that I don't have an answer to that one either, but that is a great question. I think depending on also the type of what the protection is that they're wanting to use the hail cannons for. What I understand is maybe vineyards and orchards have maybe a smaller cannon that wouldn't be necessarily as loud. So there could be some changes depending on the use.
Okay, follow up. How do the dogs react in the area?
My dog sleeps through it. Like, it does not bother him at all. Yeah.
Other questions for Nicole Orley?
Okay, Daryl Hayek. How much acetylene does it go through a minute?
Man, these are tough questions. I don't know.
You guys quit asking these tough questions. I'll never get her to present again, Just kidding. I have a question for Lee. So discussing the damages done to panels, can you describe, was it more like a windshield break, or how many holes through the panels did you have? How much glass on the ground did you have to clean up? That type of thing.
Well, the modules that were shattered, there were multiple. I want to say there was anywhere from, 1 or 2 to 7, 8, or 9. I mean, there was a lot of them. The ones that did succumb, once one was fractured or broken, it seemed like it just kind of gave way. So. And as far as, there were some bits of glass on the ground as well. So that was pretty important for us then for the crews to be protected pretty well and to, make sure the site was cleaned and safe to work in. So yeah, it creates quite a minefield on these sites.
So can you share how you determined who was going to recycle them? I know NPPD had several calls from some local entities wanting to recycle them.
My understanding, and I think there could be others in the company that probably know more than I do, but my understanding was that there wasn't too many companies that were that had the credentials in order to fully recycle 100% of the panels, and that were able to do it. Solar Cycle, they're out of Odessa, Texas, and they were the only ones that we knew of at the time that were able to do it, that were able to break down the entirety of the panel. So that's what I understood. Yeah, there's not too many people out there that are set up to do that. There could be more now, but as of a year ago, they were the only ones that were able to do it.
Any of those panels go into a local landfill?
No, none, zero.
Other questions for Lee or Nicole? Yes.
So as possibly the only resident of Scottsbluff in the room, you can bet that when I get home and I see the city manager, I'll be the first one to tell him about hail cannons. But more seriously for GenPro, obviously the image of those fractured panels in that array went nationwide for all the naysayers in solar for any number of reasons. Does GenPro have any products, lessons learned, case studies, any other information that we can help communicate the positives from the recycling standpoint to the resilience of the panels to the success story in cleaning up the mess, that we can help push that counter narrative back with? And I'm interested not only because my house was 3/4 of a mile away from that facility, but we're also trying to develop utility scale solar in the same county. So we hear about that a lot.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think one thing it has done is gotten that conversation going. Technology from more resilient material, whether it's more resistant glass or controls that would be more reactive to oncoming weather, that would stow the panels in a more favorable direction, whatever that is. But the other thing that, more practical side from an EPC standpoint, developer standpoint, is really, on the front side of it is the cost going into these now, because now the whole industry is shifting how we look at these building and developing these systems, because the insurance folks are going, we're going to do this different now, unfortunately. In the last year, 12 months, whatever it's been, Texas, was the big game changer. All of a sudden, insurance companies are going, this isn't going to work anymore. So rates are doing different. Everybody has sub-limits that are different on hail. And so what's caused us to do, and I know this isn't exactly what your question is, but the reality is that the cost of some of these bigger projects, the cost of some of and the strategy of these projects are going to be different going forward. And so for us, for example, we're insurance. The insurance is going to be a big part of it. And the insurance products, the mechanism on the front side, where it was before a line item in our P&L, it was just an expense. Every year I just signed off on, here's our commercial insurance package. My agent came up the stairs, here it is, I signed off on it, see you next year. Now it's the weekly, monthly conversation. Like, okay, well, what projects do we have? What RFPs are we looking at this next quarter, this next year? What projects, what counties are the projects that we're looking at? What counties in Illinois are we working at, or Oklahoma, or Kansas, or Missouri? I'm in administration in the EPC in South Dakota, and I'm looking up the hail risk for counties in Missouri. Who would have thought of that a couple of years ago, that's what an EPC admin nerd would be doing? So that is the state of kind of where the solar industry is at, that we're buying builder's risk project level insurance per project, and now that becomes a project line item in RFPs. So if you're an EPC, you're approaching costing that way and that granularly, so that you make sure that you're covered. Because now if you're looking at portfolio of projects and you still have just a kind of a blanket insurance floater, one policy that kind of covers one event for whatever, and you have, solar projects that are a county or two apart, you might be underinsured by a long ways. So, because we've had 0 claims since 2014, 15, and then within a year we've had 3. So the whole thing is changing. So anyway, long story that kind of went down a rabbit hole. But to your question there, we have to be thinking about everything, including sort of how you're going to the market with everything. But how is technology going to shift? How are we going to think about controls, material, how we build these things? There's a lot to think about. Because I don't think the option is just not do it. It's like, how do we do it better? I mean, we're in that growing pain phase right now, and we've kind of learned a lot of lessons over the last couple of years of what could happen. Let's just figure out how to pivot better. That's just kind of where we're at.
Hi there. So Chris Olson, and a question for Lee, basically a following up, Lee, over here, just a follow up from the last question. Oftentimes during permitting, some of the misinformation that's out there that really then gets into issues around counties requiring potentially groundwater testing pre-post construction. That is that, these panels are filled with toxic materials. They're going to leach. They come back to the hailstorms, yours, the ones in Texas and the like, saying, oh my God, there must have been leaching on the panel. So kind of 2 questions. The first one on that, was Department of Environment and Energy involved at all? I mean, I don't think they're going to leach. I realize the materials are packed, but did you have any involvement by Department of Energy or Environment? Did they come to the site? Was there any discussion on that at all?
They did. We kidnapped them, and no, they did not. They
Right,
didn't show up. Nope.
No, that's it. I think that's
Yeah.
great. And so the follow up to that is, as you said, you've had a couple of sites. You're not going to be the only ones. There's the ones in Texas that. I'm wondering, and I'm not sure you're going to be able to take a public position on this, but we do have a number of states that are looking at recycling mandates, whether it be for solar or wind and turbine blades and the like, but certainly solar panels now. And the other misinformation that there's going to be hundreds of thousands, millions of panels over the next 20 years go to landfill and the like. You guys obviously voluntarily went down the road of recycling. You could have taken them out of state, somewhere else, out of county maybe, and put them in a landfill. Do you have any thoughts on, would it even the playing field for everybody in the industry if, or would you be supportive of sort of a statewide, whether it's here or Illinois or wherever, there's a number of states looking at a statewide mandate that panels, whatever have you, will be taken and recycled as opposed to landfill?
To be clear, the owner insisted on it, so it wasn't us, and we were happy to oblige. And I think it's, I can take I give you my personal opinion. I think it's the right thing to do. I mean, we're stewards of what we've been given, and I just think it's the right thing to do. Yeah, I mean, it just makes sense to me, I think it's certainly a good thing for us to be able to tell in our story. I get a lot of that too. Like and I don't understand it. I mean, I'm not an engineer, and I don't understand. I can't explain exactly every material that's in a solar panel very well, but I do know that they can recycle all of it, and so yeah, if we can, yes, let's do it. It costs a little bit of money, but yeah, let's do it. I think it totally makes sense. And it's going to get cheaper. I just talked to somebody in South Dakota today, just random guy that emailed me, said, hey, we think we want to get into recycling solar panels. And I was kind of busy at the time, and I emailed him back and I asked why. And then I responded back again. I said, hold on, let's talk about this a little more. I didn't mean that, but that'd be cool. But probably there's several certifications you have to do to get that. But I think more people need to participate in that. Obviously, then costs go down. But yeah, I think it'd be great to get into. But certainly.
Any more questions? Yes, we have a question.
Do you have any experience with the effectiveness of racking that stows during a hailstorm or using thicker paneled, thicker glass panels, or is that technology still kind of new?
I'll try to answer that. Molly Brown, find her after here. She can answer that a little better. But with the Scotts Bluff thing, because of there was such a widespread storm that happened, power went out, the stowing capability of that site got interrupted, and wasn't able to stow in the correct position because nod your head if I'm somewhat close. Yeah. So yes, so we typically we do use that type of racking where, you know, we're able to do that. So I'm familiar with that. And we have been hearing too, I mean, there's a lot of technology, a lot of development with more resistant, thicker glass, tempered glass, different material related to, you know, modules. There's a kind of a race to get there, so to speak, with hail resistant modules too. So.
Other questions? You have something?
For the two questions that I could not answer around the permit and how much acetylene does it go through, I will have an answer sometime. I've phoned a friend and I've sent it to him, the original developer of the facility that installed it. So I should have an answer if you're here through tomorrow. A reason to stay, you know, for those answers. So I'll find you those that specifically ask that, and I'll have those answers for you. So thank you.
You notice Nicole's doing her best because she wants to present next year. Not really. Okay, let's give both Lee and Nicole a round of applause.